Chapter 7 Through the Veil. There was a cool, soft surface against her face when she came back to herself. She started, throat convulsing, and coughed up a spat of water with some unidentifiable taste. It was like fallen flowers and mist and old standing stones. Upon squinting an eye open, there was nothing but the most vibrant green. She lay there impassively as her vision slowly resolved itself, focusing. Moss, untold multitudes of tiny tendrils gently caressing her cheek. It was an inexplicably comforting embrace. She hefted herself up on her arms groggily. There was a rough cloth hanging over her, woven of some plant fiber, crafted with some skill. For all that it was scrapesome and somewhat unpleasant, its surface was consistent, and it held in her warmth. Raising her head, she took in the view of an unfamiliar courtyard, or was it a glade? Dirty white marble hemmed the place in, columns towering far overhead, but its grandeur was clearly that of a fading memory. On all sides, plants were reclaiming the elegant architecture, root by root. She realized that she was actually sitting on a stone bench, but one that had been almost entirely subsumed in a blanket of delicate but adamant growth. There might have been a ceiling once, but now the only roof was built in branches, faint light falling between the many outstretched fingers and limbs of greenery above. There was a small fire not a few paces away. She propped herself up, and as her covering slid down her back, she became aware that she was naked. Pulling the covers back up, the ethereal cast over her surroundings sharpened into focus. Alone, in a strange place, naked, the vulnerability of her situation grasped her by the throat. And another thought struck her. She looked around furiously. Where was Adrian? "Your clothes are over there." Kendra leapt at the unexpected voice. Closer, closer than she could have believed. Sitting across the flames from her, languidly laid out against a fallen piece of stonework now covered in roots and leaves, was a man. Lying low, partly concealed in the haze of the heat, she'd not looked twice at him. He had a long finger extended towards her shirt and trousers, hanging near the fire. "You'll forgive the indiscretion. You'd gotten quite wet after your little escapade in the river." The voice was cool, amused, and quite impersonal. There was an accent to it she could not place. Kendra stood, walking quickly to her clothes, blanket held tight about her shoulders. "You pulled me out of the river?" she asked urgently. "Tell me, did you see a boy with me?" She looked down at the man, swallowing anxiously. Whatever danger Adrian might now be facing, she was to blame, bringing him to the camp, pulling him into the river. She felt a pang of guilt keenly in her chest, but then it was forgotten, as the full strangeness of the man came to her attention over several long moments of silence. He was a Sylvan, an elf. There could be no doubt about that. Back home she had listened eagerly as the storytellers spoke of the forgotten days, now centuries gone, describing this lost order. His skin was a brown and woody chestnut, his hair dark and somehow tinged with a faint green, either a natural pigment or some long inhabitation of lichens. His hands and bare feet ended in slender, clawed digits. There was a faint glow to his eyes, like long smoldering embers, and his ears were long and tapered, poking out of the tangled mane. He sat with a smirk, watching Kendra watching, enjoying the effect. "Didn't see anyone else," he eventually answered indifferently. "I quite doubt they would still be alive if they went in with you. Frankly, I was expecting to pull a body out of the river." Kendra curled in on herself, the breath gone out of her like a punch to the gut. But in a moment she had mastered herself, breathing ragged but constant. She was alive. There was no reason to think that he, whatever he was not as well. She shook her head unsteadily. "He's not dead," she said insistently. "We don't know. You can't know that he's—" Her knees shook under her, and she knelt hastily next to her apparent rescuer. "Please, sir, we need to find him. He's all alone." A pointed hand was over her mouth in a movement she barely saw, just as a long finger over his own lips called for quiet. Her voice, she registered dimly, had been rising in volume until she had been nearly shouting. He appeared nettled, but he still responded in measured tones. "After I go to the trouble of saving your life, it would be rather rude if you cast it away now." He gestured around sharply. "Look at this place. Do you know what lives here? I don't. Do you want to find out? I don't." His face cracked into a fanged grin and a shrill giggle before snapping abruptly back to chill disdain. Kendra edged away from the elf, unnerved. But for all her discomfort and fear, there was a bubbling of excitement as well. She'd always wanted to see the beings of the legendary past, the province of old graybeards weaving strange and incredible tales before her shining eyes. Cultured and honorable were the elves before they'd been driven away. The elves of her imagination had a grave nobility to them. Considering him doubtfully, she decided to shelve any such judgments. She bowed her head. "I am sorry," she said, much more quietly, some genuine contrition in her words. "I was worried about my friend, and it made me thoughtless, but I owe you a great debt of gratitude for saving me. My name is Kendra. I hope you might please help me a little while longer. I'm afraid I might be a bit lost." The man watched her diplomatic response with raised eyebrows. "Pretty words, indeed," he said archly. "Put your shirt back on, Kendra, and we'll discuss what more help you'll be needing." He gave a dismissive wave, and she walked quickly behind the fallen stone where her clothes hung. "You must know that charity is rare here. If I help you, there will be something you must do for me in return. I've already lingered too long." Kendra nodded eagerly. It smarted to ask more of a stranger that had already helped her. It appealed to her sense of fairness that she might somehow repay him. "Please," she said, "however I can be of assistance. I'm afraid I don't have very much to offer right now, but I'll do what I can. But if I might ask—" She looked back from behind the stone, lacing up the cord of her top. "Where exactly is here?" His red eyes flared with amusement. "You've not guessed?" he snorted. "You're more lost than you could have possibly imagined, little Kendra." With a wave of his arms he gestured about to the fallen stones and the irrepressible incursions of greenery. "Welcome to the witch's garden, human." A faint shame pulled at her, a tug that could not hope to wipe away her prevailing sense of wonder. Selfish, terribly so, but it was like stepping into a fantasy. She looked about her with new eyes, childlike in their delight, because in that moment it was all more than she could have asked for. And so it was that she spoke clearly and boldly, not for any excess of courage, but because fear was suddenly far away. She gave a small but practiced bow. "Thank you for your courtesy," she said sincerely. "I will help you in any way I can. Might I ask your name?" The elf's eyes glinted and narrowed speculatively before he relented. "I am Caleb, and I want your story." He was looking away, hands moving through a rucksack nearby, and so did not realize until he looked up again, pen and journal in hand, that his listener sat dumbfounded. "You gave me your word," he reminded her, a little testily. Kendra swallowed, coming back to herself. "Ah, yes, of course. I was just a little bit surprised. If I might ask, why?" "I hardly need to explain myself." His voice was suddenly tense and violent. Kendra raised her hands placatingly as Caleb put down his implements, wringing his hands twitchily. "Why does it matter? Curiosity is the birthright of all thinking things. Do you not know that much?" "I'm sorry," Kendra said, rushed but soothing. He seemed oddly fragile. "I was only surprised because people don't ask about me, generally speaking. I'm not remarkable." She flushed a little, but the words seemed to cool Caleb's agitation. "You're the first human I've ever spoken to. The first human my people have encountered in—" He trailed off, then shrugged. "What is or is not remarkable is based on context. You're remarkable here. There have been precious few of your kind seen since the last massacre at the last grove. Since the garden." Kendra gaped in wonder. "You've never seen a human? How long have you been here?" Caleb laughed and shrugged again. "Not so long, I don't suppose. Not compared to some. I was born under these branches, and years pass easily here. It's hard to tell one from the next. There aren't seasons in the garden." A dark grin flickered at his teeth. "The weather just has moods." Kendra thought hard on her histories. The last elves had been banished from the kingdoms of men in 147, among the last of the wild things. "Over 3 centuries ago," she murmured. "Then we have a lot of catching up to do, don't we?" The pen was posed over paper impatiently. "So, best start talking." "Now?" Kendra fidgeted. "But the friend I—" Caleb dismissed the objection with a wave of his hand. "We'll do it in installments if we must, but we must start now." He gave her a hard, appraising look. "Frankly, I don't know how long you'll last here, so the sooner the better." Kendra blinked. It had not sounded like a threat exactly, but her skin prickled nonetheless. "Why would I not last?" she asked, voice a carefully composed calm. "Well, you humans are short-lived things, no? Fragile, raging fires that consume everything around them till they sputter out. So—" He stuck the pen in her face, and she distantly appreciated a flash of an elegantly, lovingly carved handle. "While I still have you, Miss Kendra the human, my little inferno, tell me about yourself." Kendra broke off, her gaze evasively. "I'm really not that interesting. I know some histories. I could tell you about Trinia, and my kingdom, and what's been happening there, and—" She paused as Caleb waved in extravagant disgust. "How would you know any of that? You're scarcely in human adulthood, aren't you? You didn't see any of those lofty things, I'll warrant. A story of a story isn't much good for anything, least of all if I don't know you and how you're twisting it. Oh, don't be insulted," he added offhandedly, as her eyebrows raised. "Everyone twists their stories, more or less." Off balance, Kendra praised her unreasonable rescuer turned scribe. Probably faster just to give him what he wants, she reflected. "All right," she allowed hesitantly. "I'll tell you about me. I was raised by my aunt in a small town to the east called Oakbrook. She was a busy woman, but she took care of me. She'd taken over the Aberth family business when I was young. My family's mine was the industrial heart of Oakbrook. I was tutored in literature, the arts, trade, and numbers. She even let me learn a little archery." Kendra cast about vaguely. "I don't know how much of it would interest you. I went to temple, I was a fair enough rider. Once in a while I attended a party for my aunt's business relations. Kendra started as a powerful grasp took her wrist, almost painfully. Caleb was glaring. "What?" she asked, uncomfortable. "You said you were going to help me," Caleb said unevenly. "I expected lies, but this? What good is this?" Kendra felt a chill and a flicker of panic. "It's the truth," she snapped. "Let go, you're hurting me." After several moments, the grip slackened, but the glare continued, contemptuous. "So where'd you get all those scars? You left that out of your charmed life that you've lived?" Kendra turned, inclining her burns away from him. "It was a long time ago. It's nothing to complain about when I lived the life of a pampered rich girl. I never wanted for anything. I was fed well, I was clothed in nice dresses, I had wise tutors and a fine education. Lots of people would do anything to be me. No one could have asked for more." "You certainly sound like you want me to think very much that it doesn't matter to you, Miss Kendra. Tell me, why did your aunt raise you? Where were your parents?" "My mother died in the fire," she mumbled quietly to a root at Caleb's feet, before Pride raised her head. "So my aunt looked after me." "You said she was busy." "People looked after me. I was looked after. Nannies, tutors, maids. I saw her when she had time." "Yes, of course, of course. You were fine. As comfortable as any human child could be made to be." His pen was scribbling violently. "So, Kendra," he said in the tone of abruptly changing course, "why exactly are you here?" Kendra looked at him, pained. "I fell in the river. I was with a caravan, but I got separated with my friend. There was something strange in the woods. There's always something strange in these woods. Not that you know what's strange and what's not. By all rights, your own presence is highly irregular. But that's not what I meant. This caravan, why were you there?" "I was working," she answered, defensive. He reminded her of an aggressive dance partner, ahead of tempo, always on her toes. He rapped the rim of his journal loudly with the pen. "Working as what? Their scribe? You're a little rich girl, groomed, educated, a prize mare to be trotted out. You could have been married off, even with a face like yours. People like you don't work in caravans." The right side of Kendra's face burned with agitation. Even after all these years, it was disconcerting. The other half was as unfeeling as ever. "I work in the caravan now, all right? I'm not rich anymore. I left." He was at her again in an instant. "Why? You left home for a reason." Words burned at her lips, unsightly and jagged, yearning to burst into the light. Then Kendra swallowed them. "I guess I just was sick and tired of my aunt," she said flatly, looking away. "I wanted to go do something big and exciting and have an adventure, and now I got exactly what I was aiming for. That's what you wanted to hear, isn't it? You wanted to hear how stupid I am, so you could have a laugh at my expense. Well, fair enough, Caleb. You got me. I'm a colossal idiot. So go on, then. Mock me and be done with it." Caleb wasn't laughing. She rubbed her nose hard, then risked a glance over to him. She regretted it. His eyes seemed to have changed, like flames bursting out of a lamp, seething. "Gods above, is this really what you are?" he said in a hiss. "What, a spoiled rich girl who didn't know how good she had it?" Kendra said quickly. She did not like that look in his eye. It felt dangerous. "I admitted that, didn't I?" "A liar," he spat with distaste. So thorough and deep down that I don't think you even admit the truth to yourself. I told you the truth, Kendra replied weakly. I'm sorry if it's not particularly satisfying. Caleb barked a laugh, short and brutal. All good lies are a little bit true, as you clearly know, human. Don't take me for a fool. Your provided explanation is true in the same way that a bird beating its wings is responsible for a hurricane. I think you're reading a bit much into my answers, Kendra said, carefully placating. There's no real way to tell if I'm lying or telling the truth. Neither of us can exactly prove it one way or the other, so why don't we both just calm down a little? With a sharp snap, Caleb shut his journal. Not quite correct. I may not know the real story, but I can see when I am presented with a lie. Running off on your own to follow adventure and glory, that's foolhardy and brave, and not you at all. I know it's a lie because you, little Kendra, are a coward. It stung like a slap in the face. Then she nodded. Sure, fine, Kendra muttered, looking down. You've got me all figured out. Then, happy now? Can we go? Go? My friend, she snapped. We should be out there looking for him, and whatever this was, this interview, it's just been a waste of time. Oh, you can get angry, just not on your own behalf. His smile was almost pitying as he rustled through his pack. Even now, you're still lying to yourself. He's dead, Kendra. Humans die here. That's the purpose of the garden. That I pulled you out of the woodwind was an accident, a freak chance. I didn't suppose you'd be around terribly long, but you're a sadder, more pathetic little wretch than I could have imagined. In all your little life, you've never reached out to do anything for yourself, have you? You just accommodate and cower and hope you'll be good enough. Kendra sat speechless, watching as heavy tears began to fall down his cheeks from burning eyes. Even now, all you care about is his friend. You're empty. You don't even care that you'll die here. He sighed, straightening, his face solemn. He pulled his hand out of his pack, holding a long, curved knife. Well, don't worry. I'll put you out of your misery.